Everybody, welcome. I am excited to meet with you today and run through part of my new masterclass that I put together. Today, I want to talk to you about strength and resilience, or strength for resilience, health, and longevity. Ultimately, what I've done is I put together an executive's guide to training properly. Now, if you want to get into better shape, if you want to improve your longevity, and if you want to have a sense of well being throughout your entire life, one of the most important skill sets that you can develop is your ability to strength train and to train well. I've heard over the years, many people attribute up to 70, 80, 90% of your results to diet and nutrition. I actually disagree with that fundamentally. I think that diet and nutrition are critical to your overall success, but if you don't know how to strength train well, you will not get the results that you're looking for. And so people who develop the ability to train for resilience, train for health, and for longevity are the people who maintain a youthful look and feel throughout their entire life. Think about this for just a moment. If you run into somebody that you would classify as old, there are a few markers that you would look for. The first one is that maybe they have a higher body fat to lean body mass ratio, and that in and of itself makes them look older than they were before. The second is the way that they move. If someone is constantly doing the old man shuffle where they're shuffling their feet, they can't move in effective ways, and the movement is not fluid, you tend to think of them as older. And so resilience, health, and longevity are directly tied to your ability to strength train and strength train well. But there's a lot of misconceptions out there when it comes to training properly. I want to walk you through a few of those today. So I think the first thing that we have to establish is, how do you train for strength? How do you train for resilience? And then how do you train for longevity? If you're like me and you're an entrepreneur, you're a business owner, you're a CEO, or maybe you're a doctor that's very busy, but you also have family, you have other obligations, one of the most important things that you're looking for is to answer the question, how do I train for these three things without spending hours and hours in the gym? Now, before we dive into the how, I want to give you some perspective on what the results are when you learn how to train well. So I've got one client who's a CEO who's recently said at 51 years old, I've never been stronger. A business owner that I work with said at 56, I can lift more now and with less pain than ever. And then a doctor that I work with at 52 is stronger than he was back in high school. And so one of the most common misconceptions is that as we age, we automatically lose muscle. That's actually not the case. The loss of muscle, the loss of muscle tissue, if you're doing all things well, if you're training well, if you're doing eating appropriate nutrition, you won't lose muscle until probably into your 70s or 80s. Now, it might happen earlier. It may happen slightly later than that. But for most of us in our 40s, 50s, and 60s, and even early 70s, if we're eating well and we're training appropriately, we don't have to lose muscle, and we don't have to get weaker. We don't have to move in these inefficient ways. So when you look at what's not working, this is where, as I'm sitting down with clients and potential clients, we talk through some of the things that aren't working well for them. There are a few common themes that come up. The first one is you go to the gym, but you don't look like it, and that feels embarrassing. The second is you have nagging pain that really doesn't go away. Your low back, your hips, your neck, etc., continues to rear their ugly head on a recurring basis. The third is that you lack energy to make it through the workouts and your busy day, and you feel like you've got to juggle one of those. And so I'm going to work out hard because I've got a lighter day at work, or I'm going to work out, very heavy and very difficult because I can do that and I can offset my energy at work, but I can't have both, and that's really not the case. So that's something that I want to get into today to help you to understand how your lack of energy is a construct of your poor training. Next is my workouts are taking too long. This is a very common thing that I hear from clients. I don't have time to work out is what that's often translated into. And then the final thing that is probably not working for you is that you look in the mirror and you feel old. I talked a little bit about this just a minute ago, but there are certain indicators that each one of us have that make us feel old. And for most people, it has to do with our body fat and our lean mass ratio. It also has to do with the way that we move. If we can look a certain way and we can move a certain way, we tend to feel much younger than what we really are. So the solution to these problems is that you need an integrative approach, something that respects your time, something that fits into your lifestyle, and something that also doesn't have you eating apart from your family. This is one of the most common things that I see. Now, we're not going to dive into nutrition today because this is primarily about strength training, but I bring this up because this is something that I hear more often than not from clients is that I got in shape when I went on some sort of extreme diet that had me eating out of a package that was totally different than what my family or my colleagues or my friends were eating. That doesn't need to happen. When you learn how to develop the ability to train well, your nutrition can be very flexible because part of what we're building in is this ability to have metabolic flexibility so that you can grow muscle, so you can have longevity, you can feel great, and you don't have to be that weird guy or gal sitting in the corner with your own little chicken breast and rice in your prepackaged container. The solution is this integrated approach that also doesn't include marathon gym sessions unless you want them. Now, some people have the time to go to the gym for an hour or two, and if that's you, great. If not, you don't necessarily need that amount of time in order to get the results that you're looking for. And then finally, the solution is an integrative approach that doesn't include these marathon stretching sessions. Now, we tend to lose mobility and flexibility over time, not just because of the structure of our muscles and our other soft tissue, but primarily because we just don't move like we used to. And I'm here to tell you that if your strength training program is set up appropriately, you don't need to have marathon stretching sessions in order to develop the mobility that will keep you functioning and keep you moving well throughout the rest of your life. So this integrative approach has to come together to where time, lifestyle, and goals interlink and overlap so that you have a strategy that's custom for you. Now, this is why my executive coaching, this is why my bespoke coaching that I work with the majority of my clients on is not cookie cutter. So meaning that I don't just create a program and sell that to people so that you are then plugged into the same program that your colleague or that your neighbor is. Time, lifestyle, and goals have to be the driving force with this integrative approach to your overall strength training plan. Now, an integrative approach is the confluence of time, lifestyle, and goals, but it is not a generic protocol. And, you know, this is where I'm a big fan of Andrew Huberman, so please don't, take this the wrong way if you also enjoy his podcast. I don't want you to become a Huberman bro where you find every protocol that he or another person puts out on the internet and says, I'm now going to add that protocol. I've met guys before where they are out of shape, they're overweight, they are weak, they've got too much body fat, health is not where they want to be, but man, do they have all the protocols that they're going through, and their health and fitness is basically another full-time job. So an integrative approach is not another generic protocol that you just add to the current protocols that you're already doing. An integrative approach is not the non-essential noise. Now, again, I'm a fan of Peter Attia, not a big fan of Gary Brecka, but what I'm putting in here so that you understand what I mean by non-essential noise is when someone tells you that you need to stay away from something or that you need to add these things in. Oftentimes that's noise relative to your goals. So if I'm sitting here and I'm drinking my green tea and I tell you that flavonoids are one of the most powerful things that you can do for your body, and you were to say, wow, Steve, I'm going to start doing that, but yet you don't really have a goal to improve your overall immune system, you just need to lose 20 pounds, then adding in your green tea is not going to make a marked difference in relative to your goals. Once we lose the body fat, will adding in some green tea so that you can boost up the flavonoids and you can boost up your immunity and improve your longevity, will that be a lever that we could pull? Yes, 100%. But relative to where you want to be 20 years from now, the biggest lever that you could pull would be to put on some more muscle and to drop some body fat. So understand that there are certain things that, while they may be helpful, things like Atia talks about, and many things that are not helpful, think Gary Brecka's conversations, those are just noise unless they fit into your time, lifestyle, and goals. And then the final thing that an integrative approach is not is outdated ideas from bad coaches. We live in a day and age where I'm an old guy. I'm coming up on my 50th birthday, and I've been in this business well over 25 years. Now, having said that, the internet is ripe with young teenage and 20-something-year-old influencers who come on and will promote ideas that are still really outdated ideas, or things that they're very confident about but are not really effective ideas. And so the integrative approach is time, lifestyle, and goals coming together at that confluence point so that it works for you. It is not a generic protocol, non-essential noise, and outdated ideas. So while we're talking, or before we get deep into strength, we really need to define what it is. And I'm going to give you two buckets that you can think about strength in. The first bucket is what we call functional strength. Now, functional strength is the ability to perform better in your chosen activity. So think about this of life and sport, right? So I'll give you some more examples in just a minute of what functional strength is and what it isn't, because it's often misunderstood. Structural strength is the other part of what strength is. And think about this in just relative to more muscle size. Now, if we break it down to these first principles of functional and structural, everything else can make a lot of sense. It doesn't need to be complicated for you. So let me give you some examples of what functional strength is. So this is strength training that makes everyday tasks easier. So for instance, if I'm in my desk and I want to stand up and I want to be able to do that without aches and pains along the way, then a box squat might be an essential exercise for me to develop functional strength, my ability to function better in life. Now, how do I increase that box squat? Well, I could do that multiple ways. I could add some bands to my legs. I could hold a kettlebell in the front and do it more goblet style. I could even be doing box squats with a barbell on my back. It doesn't matter what I do relative to adding the load, as long as it leads to better functional strength. Now, push-ups are an example of an exercise that leads to better scapular stability. Now, why would I need better scapular stability? If I have better scapular stability, that means that my shoulder blades sit where they need to be, and my ears are not eating my shoulders all the time. Well, why is that functional? It's functional because one of the most non-functional things that we do throughout the day when we're driving or we are just sitting at a desk is hunching forward. This becomes non-functional because we lose the ability to rotate left and right in the neck. We lose the ability to have great energy by just having overall good posture. And so a push-up is a great example of a functional exercise to develop scapular stability. A wall lean is an exercise that can decrease your forward head posture. Now, you want to look old over time and you want to lose your ability to do a lot of things, develop a forward head posture. Wall lean is a great exercise to help to reduce that, which again builds more functionality in your life. Now, as a quick aside here, I've got a client that I'm working with that came to me and said, "Hey, I can't turn to look behind me when I'm driving in the car. I need to be able to turn my head to look behind." That's very functional capacity, right? That's functional strength to be able to do that. In the first couple of times that we started working together, he wasn't able to do that. By the time we got into probably the second half of our second session or third session, he could turn his head to where he could see behind him better than he had for the past, 5 to 10 years. So doing an exercise like a wall lean can decrease forward head posture, which gives us more functional strength. Wall reach reduces headaches. But ideally, you want to think about functional strength as it allows me to improve my everyday tasks, or it allows me to improve my strength, my performance in my chosen activities. So if I want to become a better runner, a hip thrust could be a phenomenal exercise because it's going to make me faster. It's going to help me to get into hip extension and drive forward much faster. If I am doing that exercise, it leads to better performance. So think functional is everyday task or improvements in performance. So if I'm thinking about functional strength and I'm working with one of my athletes, I'm not trying to do some sort of crazy activity like this, standing on a ball or doing something crazy where you've strapped multiple bands to your face. This is not functional strength. Over-reliance on balance in exercise, that's not functional. Those are just circus tricks and circus type activities and exercises that they're kind of fun to watch. They're fun to see, but they don't really translate into better functionality in terms of your ability to move through life or your ability to be better in sport. So functional strength, for instance, for one of my lacrosse players is a deadlift, because he has to have the ability to drive hard forward and to move quickly. Well, a deadlift done with a significant amount of upward force makes him stronger so that he can move quicker on the field. Now, time, tempo, all of those things matter. We'll get into that later. But just understand that functional strength is what we talked about before: improvements in everyday tasks or improvements in performance. It is not crazy circus exercise. Now, before we dive into what structural strength, so the second piece of this is we need to understand why we need it, right? So think of structural strength as growth, or we call it muscle hypertrophy. So just that we're making that muscle get bigger. There's several reasons why it's important for you, and it really doesn't matter what your overall goals are. You may not be looking for some of these things, but I will tell you, you need more growth, more hypertrophy. In fact, there's very, very few people that I've ever said, no, we don't need to grow muscle on you. And I'm talking about clients ranging from young athletes, professional athletes, Olympic athletes, all the way to my 40, 50, 60, 70-year-old male and female clients. Almost every single person will benefit from having more muscle. So why structural strength? Well, number one, it improves your overall aesthetics. When you look better, you are going to feel better. If you can fill out that t-shirt, that polo shirt, the button-down shirt, and feel like that you look your best for right now, you're going to feel better. And there's a lot of benefits to that. That's not something to be dismissed. Now, I'll cover that in future master classes, why the psychology plays such an important role here. But that is number one. Every single person that I've met with over 25 years in this industry comes to me because they say, hey, I want to look better. And so growth and hypertrophy of the muscle helps you look better. And it's an important aspect of why we do what we do. Number two is a bigger muscle trained well improves your ability to be more flexible. Now, why is that? That goes against what many of you believe, that a big muscle means that I'm bulky and I'm inflexible. That's actually not the case. If you are inflexible in a joint, you are most likely inflexible partially because one part of that joint, one side of that joint, is bigger than the muscles on the other side of the joint. So, for instance, if you were to look at the front of a thigh on a person where the quadricep muscles are, you've got the quadriceps, the hip flexors, you've got a wide variety of muscles that are bigger on this particular person than, let's say, what their hamstrings or the muscles on the back of the thigh are. Well, if that's the case, then this smaller muscle on the backside, these bigger muscles on the front side, are going to be out of balance. And so your hip joint and your knee joint will only allow you to move relative to what it's stable, or what it can stabilize. And so when you grow bigger muscles and you create better symmetry, you have better flexibility over time. So that's one of the reasons why I don't start my clients on these long stretching routines when we start out. Oftentimes they're starting with more soft tissue mobilization, things that I call your daily hygiene movements. But you may not be doing a lot of stretching at the beginning because, quite frankly, we need to put some muscle on. So if you come to me and say, I don't have very tight hamstrings, I would look at you and say, you have very weak hamstrings, so we need to make them bigger before your hip joint will allow you to have the mobility to bend over and touch your toes. Now that leads us to number 3, which is improved joint strength, health, and longevity. A bigger muscle typically leads to a more healthy joint. If your muscles are big enough that whenever you take force, so let's say that you are like me over the weekend, went snowboarding for the first time, it's opening day, and you're going down the hill and you hit a bump. Well, what is it that creates the shock absorber to your knee joint and to your hip joint? Well, it's the combination of the muscles in the lower leg, the upper leg, and the hips that allow your joint to be stable. Now, if you're not strong enough in your glutes, your hamstrings, your adductors, your abductors, the multitude of muscles, then the pressure is going to go directly into the joint. And so your joint now takes a significant amount of force, which, depending on what you're doing, could be upwards of 5, 6, 7, 8, even 10 times the amount of your body weight and gravity being pressed into that joint. A bigger muscle improves your ability to have great joint health for the long run. That leads us to number 4, which is your metabolic health. Now, metabolism is something that's wildly misunderstood. I just want you to think about it like this, and we won't go too deep into the to what it is today, but I do want to give you just a basic definition. So think of metabolism as your body's ability to function. So it's all the inner workings of your body, and the way that your body works is by utilizing energy. So it burns energy, and it sometimes, if you're very inefficient, then it's burning more energy, right? So everybody says, I want a better metabolism, which basically means that they want to burn more energy so they can lose fat. And so typically that's an inefficient metabolism because you're burning a ton of energy. People with a very efficient metabolism, that they tend to put on more body fat, right? Now, your metabolic health is just essentially that if we can have some sort of flexibility, that's kind of a cornerstone of your overall metabolic health. If we have the ability to burn carbohydrates, we have the ability to burn fat, we have the ability to utilize protein to build tissue, muscle tissue, lots of other tissue, then overall you're going to be more metabolically healthy. Hormones will be in line much better. You'll be able to process the carbohydrates or the sugars that you take in. You're going to be able to utilize the fats. But more muscle generally means that you will have better metabolic and then thus better hormone health. Now, the last reason why structural strength, so thinking growth and hypertrophy, is the really something that's got to be a number one priority for you, is it provides long-term health protection. So if I am, let's say, 70, 80 years old, and I'm running into a situation where I'm losing muscle mass. Well, the more muscle mass I lose, the less protection I have against something that's catastrophic. So let's say that I'm in my 80s and I have very little muscle mass. I fall down, I break my hip, I get sick, I can't eat well, I can't move, I can't protect my muscle, and my body weight drastically goes down. Well, it's that drastic drop in body weight that puts me at risk of death. I don't function as well. People don't die from a broken hip. They die from not being able to recover from that broken hip. And so bigger muscle throughout life helps you in many, many ways, which we'll get into in future master classes, protect against many long-term health negative side effects. So as we wrap up this section of the two segments that you need to be focused on with strength, functional and structural, here are some of the most common or frequently asked questions that I get asked. Um, can I get bigger and not stronger? Well, the answer to that is kind of. So if you want to grow muscles, that doesn't mean that you need to be maxing out every single time you go into the gym. So, but can you grow a bigger muscle without getting stronger? Well, so kind of. Again, if I want to grow, let's say, a bigger chest, I need to be able to do more volume, more repetitions with a certain load in order to grow that muscle. So technically, am I stronger? Well, kind of. If I could bench press 200 pounds for 6 repetitions and now I can do it for 12, yeah, technically I'm a little bit stronger. Maybe I just have a little bit more endurance with that. So can I get bigger and not stronger? Kind of, but really that's kind of a non sequitur. We really, I would say, don't worry too much about that first question. Now, the second frequently asked question that I get asked is, can I get stronger but not bigger? And the very simple answer to that is absolutely. I've got a lot of clients over the years, whether they are 20 or 70, that are getting stronger, but we're not putting a lot of muscle size on. And this is the case with people who say, hey, I don't want to get much bigger. I don't want to gain bulk. Can I get stronger? Well, absolutely. It's a matter of how we train, the speed of training, the exercises we use, the tempo. There's a lot of different things that we can do to get you stronger so that you're not bigger. If you want to understand what this looks like, just go online, look on YouTube, look in Google for some of the top Olympic lifters that are women. So they tend to be smaller, right? They tend to have smaller muscle size. And yet they are lifting stuff that if you were to lift that much weight or even that percentage of your body weight, you would be blown away. So you can get stronger without getting bigger. That's the unequivocal answer. Yes. Now, number 3 frequently asked question is, I've heard that it doesn't, that form doesn't matter. Is that true? Because there are some studies out there that say that, whether you have good form or bad form, you can still gain muscle. Well, technically, that's true. You can gain muscle with bad form just like you can with good form, meaning overall muscle size, as long as the mechanical tension is correct. Now, here's where that gets tricky. I'm not a big fan of having really bad form, because when you have bad form, you then are setting yourself up for injury down the road. And so form matters. It doesn't necessarily technically matter if you're trying to get bigger. I mean, if you look at some guys in the gym and you see that they've got big muscles, and you say, wow, that guy's got horrible form. Well, you can grow muscle with some bad form as long as the tension is correct. But if your goal is health and longevity, form is really important, because we're trying to do more than just grow muscle. Now, the next piece is, does tempo or does speed matter? This is another one that recently has gotten a lot of misinformation put out there. And I say misinformation, it's not that the information is wrong, it's just it's been misinterpreted. So does tempo and speed matter when it comes to gaining muscle? Well, most of the research lately says that it probably doesn't matter as much as what we used to think it did. But does tempo and speed matter relative to getting health and longevity goals? And that's an absolutely unequivocal yes. What I mean by that is, if you want to be able to move well, you want your joints to be healthy, then you need to be able to move both fast and slow with your exercises. Tempo and speed are part of the equation that lead to a specific result. And so if I'm, let's say, getting somebody very strong through their hips and their knees, you can be sure that I've got a very specific tempo that I'm having them work their exercises through in order to make sure that those joints are safe. I'm not going to tell somebody that is going to go do a squat or a deadlift, don't worry about tempo. Well, that's ridiculous, especially if you're 40, 50 years old and you've been out at the gym for a while. You're going to be paying attention to tempo and speed because I need you to be safe. So do tempo and speed matter? Maybe not as much as what we used to think in terms of growing muscle, but they always matter relative to the result that we're going after. The final one, how do I shape and sculpt without getting bulky? And this is really key for a lot of people. To shape and sculpt without getting bulky, this is where exercise selection comes into play. One of my early mentors, Frank Zane, if you don't know who he is, just go onto Google, type in Frank Zane, Mr. Olympia, and you'll see the perfect Greek god physique. But Frank was known to not just be a guy who lifted a lot of heavy weights. Frank was a guy that was very cognizant of building his body so that it looked a certain way. One of the things that I learned from Frank early on was that your exercise selection is really important if you want to shape and sculpt your body without just walking around like a big block. And so, can you shape and sculpt your body without getting bulky or blocky? The answer is yes, but it really comes down to exercise selection and then how long you do those exercises for. So that's what I've got for you today, guys, as far as the two components of strength training. And what I want to cover next time is how do you train for resilience and health. But if you're still wanting to stick around for a minute, I've got a couple of extra things I want to throw your way, if that's okay. So what do you do next? Well, I want to talk to you about what I do in my consulting business. So I use a method that I call my psychosocial emotional model of consulting. And basically what that means is I am not your rah-rah positive motivator type of guy. If you need that, I'm not your coach. What I am is the person that helps you to understand what is your psychology, what's the social aspect of your life, and then where are your emotions currently at, and then we base all of your coaching on those three things. And so if you're ready to make that next step, you're ready to evolve, you're ready to go to the next level, what that looks like is you'll go through a process similar to what my client Dan did, where we identified some of the key point indicators that we needed to address, or some people would call them key performance indicators that we needed to address. For Dan, for instance, you can see that he was a pretty okay shaped guy. In fact, he had some muscle. He just had a little bit of extra body fat, but he was having a harder time feeling like he looked like the type of guy that belonged in the gym when he would go to the gym, and he was struggling with energy, struggling to balance his A1C, he's type 1 diabetic. And so when we identified what his goals were, his strength training plan in particular was very specific to him. And as you can tell, we were able to pack on quite a bit of muscle. We put on about 7 pounds of lean muscle, and we lost over 8 pounds of fat in about a 16-week timeline. Now, that made him look and feel a little bit better in his shirts. But what was really cool was all of those downstream effects that his A1C was balanced out much better. He was able to regulate his eating without overthinking it. And then I love this quote that he told me when we talked. He said, now I don't even have to worry when I take my shirt off at the pool. So he's not debating in his mind of, do I take it off now or do I wait until I get close to the pool, rip it off, and then just go under the water? He says, when I go to the pool or the beach with my kids, I just do it, and then I have fun with them. I'm fully present. And guys, that's one of the most important things for me, is that I help coach you so that you can become fully present, so that your body doesn't become the obstacle from you achieving your greatest performance as a business owner, a CEO, a father, a mother, whatever it is. And so what we do when we start working together is we'll get together and we'll go through a movement assessment to determine where your limitations, your faults, where's your pain. But we also dig a little bit deeper. What are some of the root causes of that pain? Not just where is it showing up. So you may have some neck issues, but we determine that a lot of that might be coming from your ankles or your hips, or maybe from an injury that you had several years ago. And then we build out an annual plan that addresses your goals, your needs, and your faults. And think about faults kind of like your car alignment or your balance. So if you have a car that is out of alignment or the tires are out of balance, you can drive that car around just fine, and you're not going to run into any issues or any major issues if you're going from your house to the grocery store. But as soon as you start putting more miles on, or let's say that you jump onto the freeway and you pick up speed, you're really going to feel that imbalance. You're going to feel the tires. You're going to feel the alignment. They're going to be off. And over time, that's going to wear out the tires, or it's going to wear out the rest of your system that keeps you moving forward. And so we identify what your faults are so that we can address those so you have that longevity. Now, we use what I call the Milo principle, which is essentially just slow incremental changes over time. That might mean that 1 week we're focusing on getting you lifting a little bit more. That might mean that at a certain point, we progress you from one basic exercise to one that's a little more advanced. But that Milo principle is using the theory or the power of compounding so that you get great results in the long run. And then finally, I help you to train your body so that you can train your mind. Every person that comes to me says the same thing: Steve, I want to get better so that I feel better, so that I'm sharper, so that I can be more effective in my business. These things that I'm dealing with are distracting me. And so what I do is I help you to train your body so that you can train your mind to be the best version that you want to be. Now, as a bonus, I help you understand the 3 key modalities that are effective to every program. So we need to build in resistance, zone-based cardio, and soft tissue or chassis work. And I teach you how to do all of that so that you can do that for the rest of your life without needing me as a crutch. So we'll talk a little bit more about these 3 key modalities in the resilience section of the masterclass. So if you want to come back for the next one and jump in, we're going to talk about how do you keep your tissue healthy so you can move and not have the old man shuffle at 40 years old. So I want to thank you for joining me today. If any of this really resonated with you and sparked something in you to where you say, hey, I am tired of just spinning my wheels and I want to get on a bespoke custom plan for me, let's talk. So the first step would be to book a bottleneck identification call, where during that call, we figure out what your current bottleneck is. What's keeping you from getting the result? From there, we identify if it's going to be a good fit. If I can help you to get there, I'm going to tell you. If it's not the right fit, I'll tell you that as well. Now, some people say, no, you don't do that. Well, I actually do. There are a lot of people that I meet with where I will say, hey, I don't think this is the right fit. I think what you're looking for is some sort of quick fix and something that's going to happen, yesterday. And that's not really what I'm all about. And so let's just part ways at this point. But if we identify that it's a good fit and you feel like that it would be a great match for us to work together, then we start you on your path of personal evolution. So if that's of interest to you, please shoot me a message and say, hey, I was on the masterclass. I think I'm ready to get going. There's no cost. There's no obligation for a conversation. That bottleneck identification call, if nothing else, when you get finished with it, you're just going to walk out of there and say, hey, I know what direction I need to go in. We identified some bottlenecks or a bottleneck that was important for me. And this is what I've got to focus on. So again, no cost, no obligation for that. I would just love to have a conversation. And hey, thanks for joining me today. I'll see you in the next one.